Hello, I'm Natasha Vita-Moore. Welcome to H Plus Academy Roundtable. Our topic is Metaverse, yesterday, today, tomorrow. Our guest panelists include David Orban, Ivo Henning, and Philip Van Niederveld. Let's get started.
I would like to state just one or two parameters that, in my opinion, define the metaverse. Then I will formulate what I believe we should aim for it to achieve. And then I will conclude with expressing why Google, Facebook, and every other current technology titan is in a mortal danger and is unlikely to survive. The first, in my opinion, most important defining parameter for the metaverse is synchronicity. Time passing the same for everyone, whether you do or do not participate. This is to preserve causality. The second is persistence. When an action on an object changes it, it must be reflected in the experience of everyone sharing the same metaverse. The second, what we should aspire to, is to make sure and fight for open standards and interoperability, not to be talking points of corporate leaders in their desperate attempt to save their business, but to indeed be the foundation as it has been for the internet. Before HTTP and HTML, Microsoft, America Online, CompuServe, and dozens of other corporations thought they would lead and own our information platforms and ability to exchange. They failed, and we must work together to make sure that the current attempt to own and lead our existence in the digital reality is also defeated, and that open standards rule. Together with permissionless participation and creation, where I can connect my own homebrew devices to participate rather than having to use, for example, Oculus Quest, where I can invite all of you to join in my digital room rather than having to ask for a permission to position it in someone else's space. Finally, the path towards the disruption of the advertising-based business models that have dominated the past 2 decades in generating value and wealth on the internet is clear. The decentralized world of blockchain supporting digital objects we call NFTs is going to generate the new business models that are based on ecosystem participation and free transactions among participants.
In our connected ecosystems, thinking about the metaverse as a vast connected space. And many of us in this industry speak of there being only one metaverse. So if we're thinking about the vast landscape, the vast universe of this connected experience, how do all of those elements fit together? We speak about interoperability because this is that essential connected tissue, our ability to travel from one ecosystem, from one solar system to another, from one experience to another, and to communicate effectively so that we have a commons, that we have cohesiveness, not just synchronicity, because for many of us, it is an asynchronous experience as well, but it is a cohesive experience, a persistent experience, and a permissionless, and that is very important. When we talk about the sort of 4D full stack of the metaverse, you can begin to understand how interface plays a role, how all of those portals, all of the ways in which we reach these worlds, whether it is by our hardware in a headset or by some other means, they all play a role in potentially mediating our reality. And what's happening in the Web3 and in the decentralized movement is pushback. And it's happening in a very similar way to what happened in the 90s around web standards, to say, we do not want our realities mediated by our corporations only. We want to determine our own realities, create collaboratives. Those may be called DAOs, they may be multi-chain, they may be within a specific crypto ecosystem, or they may be open source. And all of the new economics and all of the new ways of interacting and working are being experimented upon together in real time in what we call the metaverse today. And that's across hundreds of different platforms. That includes everything that David is discussing around cryptocurrencies and NFTs and DAOs and new types of collectives. But it also touches everything in education and in training, in our mobile phones and our smart glasses, and in all of the hardware that is currently being developed for every field and industry. So when we talk about the metaverse, we're talking about our vast collaborative space. We're talking about the future of the public commons and how are we going to come together there, figure things out, learn together, thrive, and then share those lessons effectively.
Thank you for having me. My position is that a metaverse is a persistent social virtual world where one can live, create, work, and play. And that this has been the meaning of the word metaverse for well over 30 years, because before Neil Stephenson coined the metaverse in 1992, we were already doing what were later called metaverses, but before Neil Stephenson, we called them virtual communities and cyberspaces. So with regard to the past, the present, and the future of metaverses, I wanted to briefly show you the way I understand and personally experienced the history of metaverses, plural. So in the 70s, we had the precursors with network military simulators creating battlefields where jet fighters and tank simulators could fight together. And there was, importantly, a game called Maze War, the networked version of which debuted in 1974, which led to Castle Wolfenstein and Doom and Quake and all of that. So consumer-facing metaverses started in 1985 with Habitat, which was not a 3D metaverse, but a 2D or 2.5D metaverse created by Lucasfilm, Chip Morningstar, F. Randall Farmer, etc. And so those are the real pioneers of metaverses, showing that metaverses are nothing new. They have been around since 1985. In the early 90s, yours truly cut his teeth in metaverses and virtual reality by creating 3D metaverses for the first time. In my case, it was CyberTerm, which is short for Cyberspace Terminal. That's even before Neil Stephenson coined the word metaverse, which we would later evolve to start using to refer to these persistent social virtual worlds that we created. And so fast forwarding, you have Second Life indeed, which was a very important milestone in metaverses, because for the first time, was created an internal economy, an internal marketplace where user-generated content could be made to be sold to other people, and you could earn a livelihood inside of a metaverse. So what we are seeing today, in my understanding, is just a revival. Just like the headset from Oculus that was introduced a few years ago is just a revival of consumer virtual reality. I have consumer VR headsets from the 1990s, the early 1990s. So there again, you know, virtual reality headsets, even for consumers, are nothing new. With regard to the present, I think we are starting to see the beginning of what I call metaverse wars, which follow the pattern of the browser wars of the early 90s. And the outcome will be similar to the browser wars in the sense that we will not, and I want to stress this, we will not have a singular the metaverse. That only happens in science fiction. Look at the science fiction novels of William Gibson, and then Neil Stephenson, and then Ernest Cline with the Oasis in Ready Player One. It's only in fiction that you have a single metaverse. In reality, that doesn't happen. You have a landscape of browsers and you have a landscape of metaverses, plural. And so this vision that was taunted by big tech and Mark Zuckerberg in particular of the metaverse is a fiction. Do not believe it. They are trying to sell you just their next generation of the internet. And that is not what we have been calling metaverses for 30 years or 29 years in the case of metaverses. So look at this new article where they say that Microsoft and Meta are on a collision course for metaverse competition. That's what I mean when I say that the metaverse wars have started, and they will end up in a consolidation and a pared down field of a handful of metaverses in a few years. To finish my position statement with regard to the future, I obviously love metaverses. I think they're the bee's knees, and I think they will be instrumental in realizing important parts of our futures as transhumanists. John Smart was early in pointing out that we have a drive to creating a future that is both going outward in outer space, but also going inward into inner space, which you could call the innerverse. Remember Permutation City, the novel by Greg Egan, where you have mind uploads which inhabit a metaverse. He didn't call it that, but that's what it was. And so I think that metaverses will be the locus, the place where mind uploads will go and live when they are not embodied in a physical body. And so that is also the place, the virtual place, the immaterial plane of existence where meta minds and group minds and hive minds will see the light of day, virtual light, for the first time. And in the deep, deep future, I think that metaverses will be the way that mind uploads will live during the long travel on board of von Neumann spore ships, very, very tiny nanotech exploratory ships that will travel to interstellar and intergalactic space, but with having entire societies on board that are living and thriving as metaverse ships. With that, I rest my case.
They may choose not to be interoperable in order to lose. If they want to win, at least in the medium and long term, absolutely interoperability is a necessity. I call the union of metaverses the multiverse, and I call the union of the multiverse together with augmented reality and physical reality spaces, the Megaverse. And we are accelerating. Actually, the rate of acceleration is increasing. I call it, well, not me, but it is called the jolting. So we are joltingly progressing towards the creation of value and wealth rather than in the material world in our digital realities. So in order to be able to not only create, but also to independently preserve the value and the wealth that we create digitally, we must have ownership that is algorithmically defined, independent of any temporal and temporary corporate entity. That is why interoperability will be very simply refused and rejected by any creator that is realizing how important they are for the future of the platforms.
You're bringing up really great points. And when we speak about interoperability at OMI, we talk about a spectrum of interoperability experiences, including identity, portability of assets, portability between worlds, right? Those doors or portals, but also the social graph and making sure that one company doesn't own our social graph. Our community should not necessarily have to be mediated by a single company. And this is where there is a great deal of independent pushback and also creators figuring out how to create to open metaverse experiences, whether that's WebXR or otherwise, outside of the sort of corporate silo or control that is imposed by most of these current marketplaces and ecosystems. So thank you for bringing up that very specific definition of interoperability, because I am not an engineer, and I want to be super clear about that. I know that there are many of you who are engineers and who could speak more effectively to this work when it comes to how do you actually get devices to speak to one another. At the end of the day, we are trying to find new ways to build these communication layers effectively that do not leave people out of the conversation, that do not add to marginalization, for example, that do not add to human rights abuses, because we still want to remain human in the connected world. Even if we're avatars, we still want to be connected beings. And so centering what does it mean to be good in our connectedness? What does it mean to be valued and valuable? And maybe reset what it means to be owners, because ownership is all being redefined in this space.
To answer the question, metaverses certainly were hacked in the past, and one of the big problems of Second Life for our corporate clients was that people could troll meetings. So we created for Martin Rothblatt a corporate island called Unitherium, and there we had the unfortunate problem, because of a system architecture flaw of Second Life, that in the middle of a meeting that was invitation only for the people, for the employees of United Therapeutics, you had people strafing the meeting. And nothing as awful as what happened earlier in this meeting happened there, but you still had total strangers able to come and strafe and disturb and disrupt your meetings. So the whole point of security, those experiences like in Second Life, etc., have of course left an indelible impression on us metaverse builders. And so we are now building in tools built in for better control of the metaverses, and not only technical tools for better troll control, and but also social technology. For example, in the metaverse that we are building, we will have, like everybody else who's doing a blockchain technology powered metaverse, we will have a tokenomics white paper. But one of the ways that we will distinguish our metaverse is by having nothing less than a constitution, because metaverses are actually a lot like virtual countries. And so also now that Mark Zuckerberg and others are subverting the meaning of the word metaverse, we're thinking of starting to call them virtual societies. Because if you think about it, a metaverse is really like a virtual country minus a standing army and physical territory. And so the social policy will be embedded in a constitution, and which will be debated, of course, with amendments like in any democracy. But we will have huge sections of this constitution which are really the implementation of "don't be a dick" rule, and with rules and a kind of a police that will enable, and judges also that will be able to judge situations and to ban citizens who just don't behave and who are behaving like dicks and who are trolling and doing stuff.
Can I answer the question as well, Natasha, if we have the time? I don't know if you were done, Philip.
Yes, I was done.
Okay, thank you. Hacking is not cracking. We have to reassert our right to hack the system. Those corporate shills who want to restrict our freedom to explore should not be allowed to hide behind the need of safety and security in order to stop us from exploring the opportunities that the future brings. We must be alert in preserving the increased degrees of freedom that otherwise will lead to dead ends. Society will die if we allow our children, biological or our children of the mind, to be brought up in a world where they cannot explore.
Okay, thank you so much, David. Let me ask something here. It's interesting that Philip talks about a constitution and Ivo talks about the interoperability. And David, your current statement about protecting our rights, basically, in these virtual environments. Is there anything that we can garnish from the Electronic Frontier Foundation in the early days? Remember, in the early 1990s, before the internet began, it was still the World Wide Web, but they foresaw that our identity, our rights, our privacy were necessary to protect, and it formed a salvo to protect those rights. Do we need something similar to that, or how would you approach it today? Anyone can answer, please.
Let me just briefly answer. True names, pseudonyms, and anonyms are all three necessary in order to thrive in the digital reality. Yes, if a bank must comply with the laws of the physical world, they will need a copy of my passport. But if my professional interests are orthogonal to my personal interests, the currently weakly and dangerously enforced terms and conditions of Facebook that pretend that I must exist online only under my true name are ridiculous. Because if I am DJing by night and I am VP of compliance by day, the two things have no need to merge. Anonyms are similarly crucial for our future. If I am gay, there are over 60 countries where it is a criminal act to be biologically, psychologically, behaviorally gay, including punishable by death. And that is the reason why, as well as 1,000 other legitimate reasons, the strong protection of online anonymity must not be vanquished by pretense reasons that currently they are being attacked from.
Thank you,
Just
David.
going to give that a huge +1, because we need to make sure that the metaverse is a safe space for the marginalized, for those who do not currently have access. And if this is our collaborative public commons, it is vital that virtual beings have some capacity to work not just as their physical selves. We cannot have a safe public commons without that.
I'll give it a +1 as well, but with an asterisk, because I would like to sound a very pragmatic and pedestrian realistic note. As a builder of metaverses and building another one right now, we are still, even though these metaverses are virtual realms, these virtual societies are virtual, we are still very dependent on the real world. And in the real world, where our data centers are, where our servers are, we are subject to the power of actual well-established Westphalian nation states with jurisdictions that can shut our data centers down. And so the reality, if you want to have a thriving metaverse that is self-sustaining, that has an internal economy that actually works and that doesn't get shut down by every little autocratic state where they don't like that you have freedom of expression. So, you know, Facebook is not in China anymore. And so if a big organization like Facebook cannot operate in China, then how are we as little startup metaverses going to make ourselves palatable to the Chinese government and to other governments who are not that accepting? And so I'm still a big fan of seasteads as a vehicle for creating states that are new and that are not dependent on the jurisdiction and the legislation of existing states. However, seasteads, if we were to house our data centers there, you know, and have everybody access our metaverse, maybe on a seastead or in via satellites like the Starlink network of Musk or so, that would be great. But you know, seasteads are vulnerable to attacks by pirates, but also to attacks by states who don't like what your seastead is doing, or that don't like what your, so hackers are not only, or crackers are not only fly-by-night cowboy operations. Some of them are state agents.
I
Some
would
of them.
like to respond to your point, Philippe, and I agree that we have to acquire sovereignty not only as individuals but also as societies. Today, the police of the world, the United States, is for the first months without policing through bombing some other nation, and it has been like that for many, many years. The United States is not in an active war as we speak. And it is really for the first time for many, many decades. And we have to cheer that. However, the petrodollar, which was born from the geographical accident of excessive concentration of oil, which powered the 20th century, is over. The energy, financial, planet-wide network of blockchain with solar is designing a new geopolitical balance where it is going to be possible to stand up and realistically create societies that are sovereign. Contrary to today, where whether it is Belarus that is telling the EU that they will chop off the gas during winter, or whether it is the United States stopping countries from exporting their oil or other similar sanctions, individuals and countries will be able to define their futures. As an example, the country of Bulgaria, rather than auctioning their Bitcoin that they have taken as a consequence of criminal investigations, like the U.S. did, they kept it. And as of today, Bulgaria is able, if they choose to pay off their national debt, acquiring a level of newly substantial sovereignty that they haven't had and many countries don't have. And I think that will be the basis, once again, the solar Bitcoin energy financial network over the planet to be the foundation of a lot of things that we aspire to create in the next decades.
So I'll briefly respond to that as well. I look forward to the future that you are describing, David. I thirst for it. However, in reality, as a good general, you need to pick your battles. And my battle personally right now is to make a metaverse that is as popular as possible and that becomes economically viable as quickly as possible. I need to realize, I work with the reality that while the Westphalian nation states are swiftly eroding, they are still in power. We are not yet in a world where nation states and Westphalian type nation states have gone. And I look forward to the time when they will be gone, but I'm not going to be the revolutionary that will bring down the Westphalian nation states. I'm trying to work in the reality that we have today, and it is a fine line. You know, I have to tread very carefully. I cannot afford, as a metaverse builder, to get on the wrong side of the Westphalian nation states of today.
I think you're making great points about governance. And when it comes to interoperability, we might see 3, 4, 5, 6 different flavors based on the European continent has different rules around privacy and safety and standards. And as we begin to see a constellation of standards forming, I've been working on a project. It was originally aligning industry leaders ahead of Davos this year. It's a project called Traversal. And specifically, we've been looking at interoperability and how we build those bridges between worlds effectively. So the people who are coming to the table include the standards making bodies and the associations, but also the product holders, the game engine developers, right? Unity, Unreal, Godot, and the open source holders, as well as again, this is a 4D stack. So there are folks who hold various pieces of this ecosystem coming from all different angles. Figuring out what that constellation of standards needs to look like is very important. And John mentioned it earlier in the chat. We do need this work happening transparently in the open, and we have many different standards groups. So the spatial web folks who are working on the real world metaverse, everything that touches IoT in our buildings, the AR cloud folks who are working on augmented reality and how all of those elements are going to upload to whether that's, you know, clouds in satellite farms or in seasteads. There's a number of different server structures for being able to maintain these types of like large scale libraries long term. So I think we're going to see many different approaches to interop. So far, we're working with over 50 different countries. We're seeing, obviously, like the Koreans have vertically integrated into an interop strategy for their whole country, and saying, okay, we are all going to govern this way. And then, Philip, I don't know if you saw Dan Mason and Gabriel at Versus published basically on an update to something that John Perry Barlow wrote in the 90s around the Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace. And this is something that Barlow and I spent a lot of time together before he passed away. And we had also been rewriting this document and in our own conversations had explored what is that vast metaverse of opportunity that we wanted to make sure people would uphold and protect and really value for each other as a way to provide both mutual respect and freedom, but also mutual value and care. So Philip and David, I don't know if you saw that document. I think it needs a little bit more polish and update when it comes to the collective value of the metaverses and what these experiences can roll up to become. But I think there are some really valuable things happening when it comes to assertion of the open metaverse as important and valuable outside of single corporate role. And I think you were asking Chogwu, I'm going to say that question. Could you maybe pronounce that differently? I'm so sorry. I'm saying your name wrong here. But you were asking about the article around Meta, right? Facebook, now Meta. And I would say you're absolutely right. Many of us won't use the products. They're clunky. Some people love them, some people don't, and that may not be our best version of a metaverse product or ecosystem out there, right? If you think of all those different solar systems that we could go explore, that solar system looks boring to me, and I don't want to go there. Like compared to the other solar systems we could go explore to, I want to go to the places where I can do like vast 3D work with my friends and do some sculpting in real time. And then we can have our intelligent actors working in that, but then we still retain all of our ownership and our publishing rights too. And that doesn't exist as it stands right now.
We have had thousands of years to develop practices in shared three-dimensional spaces. Proxemics is the study of how we interact, and it definitely applies for our digital realities as well. If my avatar goes too close to another one, it will take a step back in order to reestablish a necessary distance between us. So similarly, we don't have to start from the assumption that the various regulations and legislations that we have developed for the physical world will not be applicable to the digital world. Eventually, we will be experienced and courageous enough to depart and to diverge. But in the meantime, as long as we don't stifle innovation with red tape, the starting point is okay to be inspired by the deep experience we have. The opportunity is asking ourselves, what is the metaverse as a technology innovation making abundant that previously was scarce? And the answer to that still has to come. My opinion is that we will discover how important avatars are going to be, not when they are inhabited by us, but when they are truly our envoys, powered by intelligent agents that we delegate to act and decide in our place. I see the metaverses as the places where AIs and humans meet, similarly to how I see augmented reality, where robots and humans in the physical world meet. And with that, I thank everyone, and I have to go because in the physical world, my kind wife, who prepared our wonderful dinner, and I alerted that I will be late by about 15 minutes, deserves me to join her. So I will look at
Honoring the human.
I will look at the recording and the edited production that Natasha will create, and I thank you everyone for your wonderful interaction, and I say goodbye.
Thank you, David, for being here with us. It's good to see you again.
Enjoy your dinner. So, Mark Zuckerberg did a clumsy pivot and rebranding of Facebook. However, in fairness to Mark, he did hit some nails. Maybe it's hard not to hit some nails on the head in that presentation. One of them was the point of the importance of presence. And so virtual reality has, in its 40-year or 40-plus years of development, has aspired to recreating to become the next best thing to being there with other people in physical space. So, and he was right in saying that virtual reality is very close to becoming really good at that. And we really will have virtual reality hardware enabling an enormously powerful, convincing, persuasive sense of presence of other people inside of virtual spaces, even though they are not physically with us. So we will get very close to in-person meetings, to that kind of level of presence and quality. And so it will still be the next best thing to an in-person meeting, and probably we will never reach the kind of quality of experience that a real in-person meeting can afford. I mean, there's pheromones and gas interactions between human beings, etc. So even so, we will be able with virtual reality to do so much better than what you can now do in terms of presence on social media networks. And so the problem of loneliness and the alienation and the the problems with people who kill themselves because they are so lonely in the real world, even though they may have thousands of friends or quote unquote friends on social media platforms. I think done well, judiciously, with a lot of experience and savoir-faire, and sensitivity to that, which I hope and believe we have, we will be able to do so much for people who are physically alone in the world. In that same vein, it needs to be stressed, and I saw some comments in the chat to that effect, that in our vision of metaverses or virtual societies, we are not expecting, even in the far future, for people to be present in the metaverse by means of a VR headset for 8 or 9 hours per day. No, we do want people to spend 8 or 9 hours per day or have that amount of time of presence in the metaverse, especially if it's a place where they are earning their livelihood, where they, you know, if you earn a real living, you will likely be spending 8 to 9 hours per day in the metaverse, but you won't be doing that. All of those 8 hours will not be in a VR headset. So we are designing, and we think we are relatively unique in this aspect, we are designing our metaverse to be omni-device. What does that mean? It means you can access the same metaverse, the same people, from any device, any browser, anywhere, anytime. That's our tagline on that point of differentiation. So remember, in Second Life, you were only able to use it on a PC desktop, and then later there was you could also use it on a Mac, but you were never able to use it on a smartphone. And you were never able until the really near the end, you were not able to go in there immersively with a VR headset. So the omni-device approach means that you can access the same metaverse from your smartphone, your tablet, your laptop, your PC desktop, your Mac desktop, your VR headset, your AR headset, your game console, so that you can have a continuous presence, but using different access devices.
This is exactly the trend we see happening over and over again. For those of you who I haven't interacted with in some time, I spent most of our lockdown pandemic time producing virtual events, including conferences and festivals and global celebrations. And every single time, the main challenge is to get a large number of people together in a meaningful way. And that might be in small clusters or in large spaces, but across all different types of devices, with fidelity, with cohesiveness, with a sense of persistence, right? With that sense of feeling really connected, no matter what device you happen to be on. And there are relatively few opportunities to do that right now. We experiment with tools like Mozilla Hubs, which is an open source tool that can do some of that. But obviously, these are very lightweight and sort of early stage building blocks for what we can become. We don't have great data science tools, for example, for the commons in ways that allow us to do real meaningful sense making. Right now, it's very difficult to sculpt something together. Most platforms don't allow you to do real design work together when, you know, anything more than post-it note type meetings become a real challenge. And so there are these sort of, there are challenges of both interoperability and interface agnostic accessibility. And what Philip is describing here is an accessibility movement that's happening all around the world, that is happening outside generally some of these larger headset companies, because they want to keep you in their own device. But those of us who have been in devices for a very long time will tell you, I don't use my headset very much at all these days. I don't enjoy staying in a headset for hours a day. So what I do is I go to the same experiences, I just project them or I use them on a large TV so that I still have that experience of immersiveness without having to be stuck to one person's idea of what I should be seeing in that. So we are learning to mediate our own realities and create the worlds we want in terms of collaborative spaces. And I want to cheer Philip on for doing that, because it's a very hard thing to accomplish in terms of creating a meaningful place, a portal, and a platform for that experience to land. And just to get back to another question I saw earlier, there was some conversations about avatars, multiple personas, and the sort of bevy of consciousness and intelligence that is always around us, whether we are talking about a physical room where we happen to be in a physical space, but we might have all of this other consciousness, nature, for example, intelligent all around us every time we go for a walk in the woods. In the metaverse, we do have that sort of ambient intelligence, and that might be platform specific, that might be object oriented. So as the GLTF spec is extended, we are going to see much more intelligent objects throughout our ecosystems. Those are generative, and those are our partners. So the same way we do paired programming with an AI as a code friend today, we will do that in the metaverse, but that might be a character, that might be a little crystal shard, that might be any world at all. And I jumped into metaverse creativity now 16 years ago because I'm a spec-fic writer. I write speculative fiction that takes place in these worlds. And I kept wanting to create that kind of deeply immersive and intelligent environment where we are in symbiosis, we're in participation with nature, with AI, with each other in a way that feels much more, let's say, protopian or solarpunk, or at least a positive future that I want to actually participate in, not something quite so dystopian. I think many folks in the metaverse space and also in the media space have struggled with the idea of a metaverse came from mostly dystopian stories that feel a little contentious with who we really want to be, right? We don't want that world. So we have to pull apart and say, okay, how do we get less Elbob Rifes, right? If you're thinking Snow Crash, or how do we maybe have something that doesn't just feel like the oasis, this escape zone out of Ready Player One? How do we make this meaningful? How do we add layers to our experience that are adding to our intelligence, that are adding to our connectedness, to our compassion, to our ability to collaborate?
Absolutely. So we are so deeply aligned, Ivo. It's very gratifying because the architectural design language that we have evolved for the metaverse that we're building now is very, 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 very solarpunk. I mean, our inspirations are the solarpunk movement, which started in the 70s, and of course, which famously seeks to create a harmonious balance between the individual, technology, and nature. And so that is our aspirational in terms of the visuals and also the architectural, the 3D language. But there's other inspiration sources like Zaha Hadid, a famous architect, and Frank Lloyd Wright with Falling Water, or similar, Antoni Gaudí with the very organic Sagrada Familia and Park
I've been a part of the Bucky Fuller Institute Design Science Studio during the pandemic, which gave us such a great place to explore immersive health, for example. How do we use these tools effectively to do what Amy is talking about in the chat? Maybe refine an experience for immersive health so that people can reset instead of feeling triggered by their virtual experiences.
I think it is important to underscore that, thankfully, many people in the metaverse industry and in the VR industry are not partial to the dystopian visions of cyberspace, or rather the William Gibson and Neil Stephenson and other dystopian sci-fi. We are much more solarpunk in the sense that it's optimistic, it's cheerful, we are more partial to the more upbeat and optimistic visions of the golden age of science fiction with Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, etc., than the more downbeat and pessimistic visions of cyberpunk. So solarpunk is optimistic, cyberpunk is pessimistic, and definitely in our metaverse that we're creating, we want to be of a cheerful disposition and optimistic and look forward to a future where things keep getting better if we put our minds to it. And so others like Facebook Meta, they have what we think of as the corny version of that with cartoon like avatars. We won't have cartoon avatars. We'll have photorealistic avatars, which you can of course make cartoon-like, but we don't want this kind of overly corny vision of artificial cheerfulness, but we want to, the DNA, the design DNA is really fundamentally optimistic and aims at creating spaces that are healthy for the mind, for the body, and for the future of mankind.
Right. And Mikhail makes a really great point here that we are both fluid and emergent and plural. We are often more than one face to different worlds. And so when we think about, for example, interoperability and identity, we have to also make space for plurality and for change and fluidity. And I've been grateful that many of my first virtual worlds experience happened with people who happen to be transgender and transitioned because of their work with their avatars. And so I learned through their experience how much of our own fluidity is generated through this exploration, and then how we set identities with all of our different communities based on which face we might want them to see. So figuring out how we're going to create that management layer, right? So there is a hackathon, I believe, coming up on WebXR, but there's also going to be a half-day event on Metaverse and identity that we are going to be co-convening with the folks at IIW coming up, and that would be great to have many of you engage with that as well.
So to riff off of that, putting my transhumanist hat on for a second, the metaverses and virtual reality really are the perfect sandbox to start getting comfortable with the famous notion of morphological freedom. And so in metaverses, before we can do this in physical reality and become a dolphin for a day or an octopus, we can have full morphological freedom of our avatars and start experimenting and getting comfortable and wrapping our minds around this notion of fluidity, as you correctly point out. And so I invite people to also think of metaverses as sandboxes for morphological freedom.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing multiple flavors of that, right? So what is currently referred to as XR or pass-through devices, right? Those have become so popular that I think that line became very blurry. Many people do not prefer a standalone occluded VR headset. They prefer an a pass-through device or an XR device. Smart glasses, I think, are really where we see that convergence coming together in a consumer-ready device, right? Most consumers have not put on true AR glasses yet, but they're being used in enterprise all over the world. They're being used for training, deliveries, remote presence, a number of sort of very easy use cases to put you in the room with someone else and be able to see through their eyes, for example. So I think that's where we're seeing both the standards coming together, right? So that's where spatial web and immersive web have to come together at the sensor layer in the building. And that's where the digital metaverse, the virtual, meets the real world metaverse. And this terminology of a real world metaverse is something I noticed Niantic and other AR companies picking up on, because they saw, well, number one, metaverse is a term that people want to talk about this year, so let's jump on the train. But also the real world metaverse, that layers of experience on top of our physical world is a really nice way to think about what Niantic does, for example, making playable experiences on top of cities or you know, taking an existing like Pokemon or another game and then taking it out and overlaying it. So layers are one way. I think AR has begun to talk to VR, like we have shared layers that we begin to, you know, interface with. And then we have those sort of communication layers, and that's happening through experiments in D-Bus. You can look at our OMI videos on YouTube, for example, and there are a number of interop demos that are just at the protocol and communication layer. And so a lot of R&D is happening right now in this space. And yes, Amy, I can I can speak to that event as well. And we can talk a little bit more about privacy and safety, because as we mentioned before, this is a 4D stack, and there are participation at all different layers of the stack that are going to be happening with both independent companies and corporate bodies, and they have to figure out how to play with the same data and protect the users and communicate effectively with the users. Obviously, right now, everyone in our industry is pushing back on Facebook to not keep us in black boxes in one form or another.
Virtual reality and augmented reality are really two faces of the same coin. And from the very beginning of the development of VR and AR hardware, with Sutherland in the 60s developing, the sword of Damocles, that was AR, that was not VR. And so today with XR, which is the umbrella term that encompasses virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, we're seeing this blended reality. And so I think that the reality of metaverses or virtual societies will be a blended experience where almost, hopefully, relatively seamlessly, we migrate from an augmented reality presence in a metaverse with AR glasses. And then we could, for a few hours, we can go in fully immersively with VR glasses, or flip a switch on our AR glasses and make them opaque to the real world. And also, if we're in a commute on the tube, you can still be present in those metaverses by means of your cell phone. If we still have cell phones 10 years from now, if they haven't been replaced by AR glasses by then, which is, by the way, the likely evolution of consumer electronics. I see the smartphone migrating from our hand to our pocket, and then to our faces in the form of AR glasses. So as somebody who's been doing VR for 30 years and some AR as well, I should say that virtual reality in the future as a business and as a market will be extremely successful, but AR glasses will be far more successful because the use cases are wildly outnumber those of VR headsets. So VR headsets will be $1 billion market, but AR glasses will be $1 trillion market, and they will replace eventually our smartphones. And after, and even that will not be the end game. After AR glasses, after everybody's smartphone has turned into AR glasses, we will evolve to not wearing glasses anymore, but having a direct brain interface with an off switch, hopefully, so that we can go to the internet and to metaverses directly from our mind into those metaverses and spaces. The other topic that was discussed is privacy and security in metaverses. So we pin a lot of our hopes in designing the metaverse that we're currently building on the blockchain. And so we want to bring to bear the power of decentralization and of the blockchain technology to improving the safety of data integrity and data security, but also in the same fell swoop of privacy. The direction that we need to go in is clearly the other way than what Facebook has been doing. So people do not want to have their data owned and for their behavior to be monitored without their consent. And so, for example, on the topic of advertising, we want to go with the 60s and 70s notion of the invited persuader, where I invite an advertiser into my reality and giving them explicit permission to pitch me on a product, provided that it's a product that I am actually interested in. So I do not want to see any advertising that I'm not interested in. And with these new technologies, these metaverses, these augmented reality glasses, and the blockchain technology in the mix, plus AI, we are able to create a new social contract between the citizens, the end users of all these technologies, and the providers of these technologies, a new social contract backed by a new type of constitution where the rights of the end user are enshrined and guaranteed by virtue of the holy blockchain, so that we are able to only be pitched and that our attention is ours, that we have sovereignty of our attention. My attention is mine to do with as I please, and I will decide as a sovereign king of my personal identity and my time. I will decide who I allow to pitch for my coin, for what I want to buy.
These are really interesting questions. I have a couple of things I like to do for myself that allow me to stay centered no matter where I am. My avatar is almost always green, not human skinned. I have a great deal of dysphoria with this skin color, and I feel more comfortable when I'm green. So creating that sense of belonging for myself gives me a sense of continuity, but also my friends begin to recognize me. So if I am Kenzo in Second Life and someone sees me in alt space, that sense of continuity and connectedness overcomes the lack of a shared social graph for now. Now, when it comes to diversity of experiences, I find I have to mix it up between the theater and the sort of the cultural and art side of the metaverse, which I really enjoy, right? I love going to theater shows and concerts and seeing great new art being made. But then I might need to go and sit in a nature space or meditate with a friend or just have a one-on-one conversation or go to a place on the planet I can't get to otherwise, right? And so you're putting yourself through these sort of curated juxtapositions. And right now, we have very few fluid ways to make that movement happen because search, discovery, portability, all of those things don't really work, right? We're kind of pre-search engine. If you think about the web, like pre-95, those web rings are where we're at. Like we're just starting to create those sort of, okay, my little DAO is all of my little friends and you can bounce to our 25 little experiences together, right? We're at that level, and that's a really exciting time because it is creator centric, and it's very like, it's a wonderful time to be an artist and to really play with what you can do in this space and then invite participation in a different way. That to me is what centers me and makes me feel like I'm creating value instead of just going off to have an escapist experience.
So I'm excited about the future of all of these technologies, and especially the point of convergence that they are going towards, because they will allow us, if we want to give rise or to let emerge our truest selves. If I look inside of myself, I've always felt that my true self is a ball of energy. And sometimes on Facebook, I've shown myself, my avatar, as just being that, a sphere of energy, you know, with different pulses and different moods, etc. And so personally, my hope is that one day these technologies will enable the expression, the full expression of that, so that on a smartphone, on an AR glasses, on a VR headset, and on a brain link, I will come across to people as the ball of energy that I am. So, but there is an asterisk here, and that is that we're not there yet. And so every technology always, and that goes for the opera that was mentioned, and the radio and the television, whenever you do anything to excess or extremely, it turns into its own negative. So if you have cars, they are a wonderful tool of freedom and you can move around where you want to go. However, if you have millions of cars, they turn into their own opposite and you get gridlock and you get pollution. And so things turn into their own negative when they are taken to extremes and to excess. And we're seeing that with social media. So there is a potential for all of these technologies, including the ones that we are now developing, for increasing the loneliness and the alienation that and addiction The good news is that we become ever more cognizant of this pattern of things turning into bad versions of themselves by taking them to excess. So with addiction, we hope that our citizens will allow us to monitor their behavior in limited ways, but enough so that we can pick up on early signs of suicidal ideation. And we can have like a supportive hint, like, hey, we noticed that you've been not feeling so great lately, and probably life is challenging, and life can be challenging. Life is a struggle for many people, for most even. And so just like in Las Vegas, where they pay lip service to counter gambling addiction by saying, here's a telephone number if you're a gambling addict. And I think we can go further as designers and creators of Metaverse and these new technologies in putting in safeguards, guide rails for abuses of these technologies where people can harm themselves or others by going too far. And so we really, with great power comes great responsibility. And these technologies that we are building now are ever more powerful, which means that our responsibility couldn't have been ever greater than now to make sure that we do not create tools of addiction that create psychoses and neuroses and loneliness and suicides. So we have to be eagle-eyed and watch out for the potential of abuse and self-harm with these technologies.
This has been great. And to all of you who I haven't seen in ages, it's great to see you all again. And thank you for joining us here.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for having us.